And Trump is not the only one who wants to cut costs at the Pentagon. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says DOGE is more than welcome at the DOD.
We need to know when we spend dollars, we need to know where they're going and why. That's simple accounting, and that has not existed at the Defense Department. Every dollar we can find that isn't being spent wisely is one we can put toward warfighters. We welcome DOGE at DOD. We will partner with them, and it's long overdue. The Defense Department's got a huge budget, but it needs to be responsible.
Right. This has been fascinating. Guy, we'll start with you. You know, there was this initial talk, or there's been talk, that President Trump has been talking about going after the Department of Education and trimming things there. And they say, oh, if you really want to save money, go over after the military-industrial complex. And now the president, all the new heads are like, come on over, check us out, take a look at our books.
Yeah, I mean, I think the national defense is literally something that is required for the federal government to do. So that's a difference between defense and some of these other projects that people are pretending are more important than a core existential function of government. But that being said, I think everyone understands that not every dollar is placed correctly or wisely within the Pentagon. And the fact that you have the defense secretary saying, we agree, let's look under the hood, let's try to find some efficiencies and savings in the Defense Department, I think that's right. The Pentagon should not be exempt from this overall approach. You know, it strikes me watching some of the clips that we just played, specifically the one from Cory Booker, Senator Booker. He said, we're in a crisis. He used the word crisis. He didn't really seem to believe that, did he? We're hearing that word that I think gets abused and overused. The Democrats currently are trying to attach it to this situation of people going in and trying to find some savings within our government and calling it a crisis. And it feels kind of half-hearted, like they don't quite actually internalize that. They're using the word anyway, but I don't think a lot of people are buying it right now.
Yeah, and one of the challenges the Democrats have is what they have are words, because they don't have the power in the House, they don't have the power in the Senate. It'll be difficult for them to rein in some of this spending, although possibly they could have, their numbers could have some power in the Senate. But Charlie, what do you think?
Well, I think it's the opposite of a crisis. I mean, who doesn't want to uncover wasteful spending? I say, DOGE, come to my house, check out my bank account, because I'd love to know where I can cut corners. I don't think there's anyone in the world who would say this is a bad idea, especially when you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars like we are with the Department of Defense. I mean, Pete Hegseth has said he hopes in 4 years, not once, he hopes in 4 years that the DOD can pass an audit. Because so far they have not been able to historically. This is an area where there's tons of money that is being unaccounted for, hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent on widgets, tens of thousands of dollars on pens, hundreds of billions of dollars, again, unaccounted for. So we've seen in the past some of the programming that the military has, gone down the road of spending for in terms of wokeism. And it's not pretty. $26 million being spent on trans surgeries within the military, for one example. So definitely ways to cut corners in a myriad of different ways.
Yeah, kudos to the Marines having their books in order. But as you mentioned, the Pentagon has some big goals. Joey?
Yeah, so the Marine Corps was able to pass an audit because they don't give us any money anyway. See, all the money goes to the Navy, and then they give us what little we need. Feed us, we're hungry. That's the Marine Corps. Yeah, when you look at the overall federal budget, this is discretionary and mandatory. When we say mandatory, there are certain things like Social Security or Medicare that they don't have to fight over every year. They're mandatory spending. Those things are the largest, well over 50% of what the federal government spends. Then the next largest piece of the pie is defense. Then everything else is kind of small. So when you have, I forgot who it was, it might have been whoever was interviewing, I think it was Secretary Rubio, going, what's only 1% of the budget? Well, ma'am, 1% of trillions of dollars is a lot. It's a whole lot. It's a big portion of our tax dollars. The reason why this is so important to find these cuts now is they want to pass a big bill that has tax cuts in it, and President Trump would like to have those tax cuts to be forever, to not be sunsetted. The reason why you have to balance that with cuts is because a tax cut bill without balancing your spending is a spending bill because it creates interest debt. And so this is all a part of the grander part, not grander scheme, but it's all a part of the policy decisions that Americans ask for. They ask for lower taxes. They ask to cut government waste. You have to do those in concert, or you'll end up just borrowing more money and costing us more money in the long run.
Yeah, and transparency. And then part of this has been some of the things we're learning about how American taxpayers are being spent. So that's been part of what's been so interesting. Biden might be gone, but communities are still feeling the effects of his border policies. The Los Angeles Unified School District and the New York City teachers unions are now distributing red cards to illegal immigrants. They are about the size of a credit card, and they tell migrants how to interact with federal law enforcement officials. But maybe schools, perhaps, should be thinking about education, as 69% of fourth graders, 70% of eighth graders across the country do not meet the basic reading standards. And the numbers are just as bad when it comes to math. Thankfully, President Trump is taking a look at putting parents back in charge of their education. This was a big issue in the run-up to the election. He signed an executive order bolstering school choice. That has also been looked at as very controversial, with some of the teachers' unions across the country talking about this. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, but Joey, what are your thoughts tonight?
Yeah, I don't understand fully the Department of Education issue. I don't think there's a lot of money to be found in the Department of Education. I've got friends that are principals, and one of my friends actually is in charge of finding the money to run the school district for what's called a Title I school district. That's ones that get the most federal funding. The majority of them actually perform very well. The reason why they get the money is that community is impoverished, or it's below a certain rate is below the poverty line. I think each state gets to decide majorly what they do with that money from the Department of Education. So I think the bigger sins are within states that are misallocating that money perhaps towards red cards or what have you. So I think that's a little more intricate problem than just simply, hey, let's find some money and cut it.
Yeah. Maybe some of the controversy comes from what the Department of Education focuses on, which in some part is low-income students and providing for them, and also students with disabilities. So when people are looking at the potential cuts and changes to the Department of Education, they worry about those two aspects, Charlie.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I think a lot of the public schools where a lot of parents are forced to send their children are the schools that parents no longer feel safe sending their children because they don't have as much parental control over them anymore in these settings. I mean, you see kids in public schools being subject to woke indoctrination. You see the administrators, the teachers aiding and abetting the children of illegal immigrants, giving them these red cards, saying that, you actually don't have to answer your doors, don't answer to ICE. It's just really sad because on one hand, you see kids, they can't read, they can't write, they can't do basic math, yet they're being learned how to evade the nation's laws and the sovereignty in this country. So it's a scary situation that I think a lot of people are being put in. But, with Trump giving parents more of that right and giving funding for them to go to faith-based schools and also private schools, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, there are schools all across the country, and particularly in some more diverse districts, that are communicating with their student bodies, as we've seen ICE taking action all over the country. And this has caused some concerns in school districts across the country, in school communities.
Yep. So a couple points. First, on school choice. Most of the action, I welcome anything the feds are willing to do. They have some sovereignty, for example, over Washington, D.C. Trump can do what he did with the executive order, but the real action is in the states. And we've seen a lot of movement on that front in recent years. There's been a huge amount of progress there. Texas, I think, is right on deck here. It's time for Texas to finally get this done. A bill passed in the Texas Senate, and they can get that finished. And I know Governor Abbott has been a real leader on that issue. So hopefully that red state does what has to get done. I'd say belatedly, but better late than never. On this other issue of the red card, so-called red cards, I think where a lot of Americans probably come down on it is they say, you look at the educational outcomes on actual metrics that you were talking about, reading and grade level math and that sort of thing, and you look at the sliding nationally. We talked about this yesterday. 1 in 3 eighth graders in the country functionally illiterate right now. And you wonder what kind of school district is prioritizing this type of thing, evade the feds over the core basic job that they're supposed to do, which is educating kids. And the answer is the Los Angeles Unified School District. That's their priority. I remember during COVID, kids were locked out of schools in Southern California, but some of those teachers were showing up in person to teach the children of illegal immigrants. Yeah. The priorities in some of these places are completely out of whack, and this is probably Exhibit A.